here to talk about the Green Step program. I don't know, I know many of you have heard of it. Have you heard of it before? No, okay. Well, it's, what it is, it's a voluntary program that assists cities and other entities in achieving energy and cost savings through the use of efficient resources and quality of life improvements. And it's really quite impressive. It's sponsored by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. There's roughly 150 cities and tribal nations that participate. And you can go online and read about it. Just Google Green Step, Minnesota Green Step. But what it does, it's kind of got two components. One is a framework of activities that a city can choose from to improve their environment. And so it includes 29 best practices in the areas of buildings and lightings, which is self-explanatory, both in our light bulbs and everything by now. Land use, which has to do with flows of auto flows and parking and planning your city better. Transportation, also kind of obvious how you would, could save money on transportation. Environmental management, that includes sustainable purchasing, purchasing local and so forth, parks and trails, wastewater, air quality, so those activities. And then there's the last group of activities, which falls under resilient economic and community development. And that has to do with local food and renewable energy and planning for extreme weather or extreme crises, because we deal with weather pretty good up here. We have a fire issue, I think, potentially. So, so Green Step has these ideas or plans that are out there, but additionally, they have a kind of a pathway to navigate through them so that you can, as a city, you can select items from different categories and make progress and show your progress online. So there's a 5-step program that has, defines certain, the number of activities you have to achieve in certain areas and so forth. So it's quite comprehensive. It is impressive. So Ely's Green Step history, Ely joined Green Step through a council resolution in 2014, which is, quite impressive. The current status is they've achieved level 1 and 2 in the Green Step program out of the 5. And, level 1 was about kind of getting the city on board and getting people interested. But in level 2, the city has made improvements in things like lighting and tree management and at any rate, but there's a whole system there where the city of Ely can enter information and track their energy usage by property or building, and they can, and then they can show improvement when they make changes, and then they can measure the improvement, which of course, as we all know, is the trick to streamlining. It's not just firing people, it's about, identifying areas that need improvement and then actually measuring that you have improved them. So it's quite exciting, really. And there's a whole system that supports that. So Ely is currently working on this 3-star program. That means they're going to be managing, capturing, and reporting more data on more buildings, and this in a publicly available database. And then they developed a Green Step team, which is part of the program, and it's a community program. So the people on the team are Emily Rue, she's the council representative, Scott Kokendorfer, is it Kokendorfer? I need to ask him. Okay, right. But he's the planning and zoning person in Ely, and he is a non-voting member, but he's the sort of administrative representative from the city, which is great to have. Mike Banovitz is from the projects committee, and Ryan Callan is from the EUC, and then there's 4 at-large community members, and I'm one of them. And Mary Louise Eisenhower is one. Bill over there is one of them. Bill Taft, if you haven't met him yet. And Jody Chaplin. So, at any rate, so we've had our first meeting. Oh, we got it. Okay, this is a good example. Barb put this in, and I think it's so good because you can see the Ely Public Library has been capturing the data for a longer time. But one of the requirements of their grant was that they capture data. So the PCA was out there doing good work, Minnesota Pollution Control. And so they have good history on the amount of energy they're using and the cost of it. And so that's kind of what the system looks like, which is wonderful. But the current status is the committee met once in March and will be meeting again in May. The city is currently entering data on a lot more buildings. And the green team is working on mission and mission statements and objectives and so forth. And the other thing we're working on is there's a program called RETAP, which brings in expert people who will come in and assess your properties and tell you what they see for opportunities. But we have to do a little homework first before we can get them. That is funded through, I think, the end of June. So we're hoping to slide into their program. And what would you like to see Ely accomplish in the next few years? Any insight or thoughts from the group here? You know, some of us, Bill and I already worked, so we don't count. You can have ideas though, Bill. Any other thoughts or ideas?
I don't think it would be completely related to like necessarily the energy stuff. It's something that like literally just popped into my mind not too long ago. It'd be cool as far as like public transportation. There's not really a need for like a bus service here, but it was in Ely, but like maybe like a bike program would be cool if there was just like bikes that could be lent for days or whatever periods of time for people that just want to like run chores but just might not have a bike for whatever reason that you could just like rent.
Especially e-bikes would be good.
Yeah. And then I guess with public transportation, like, yeah, maybe tapping into the Arrowhead Transit more. I don't know how many of us might have been at the Tuesday group where they spoke, but it seems like that is definitely a possibility. It's just that they kind of need a call to action from the community members and like people to call them and say, like, the biggest example that was spoken on there was like if people wanted a line to go to Duluth, they could reach out and get the funding for that and make that happen. They just need, Ely community members to call them and say, like, I want to go to Duluth. Can you do that for me? And then they'll say, no, sorry, but they have that data then that they can take and present to them. So that might be a good avenue for public transit that would help.
And that is such an important thing because as our hospital and, clinics are kind of limiting some services, a ride to Duluth is a big deal. If you're sick, you shouldn't be driving.
Yeah, right.
It's so true, and no, that's a very good point.
I was just meeting with a friend too, who's on the board of the college, and she was saying how important that is for students at the college.
Mm-hmm.
That so often they need to get to the airport or they need to get to Duluth, Hibbing, and they can't. So I think there's probably lots of people who would use that.
But I think might just be a large matter of like people just aren't educated on all the services that Arrowhead Transit already provides, let alone could if people just took the action to call and ask for that and see what might happen.
Yeah.
Well, now the city has started to work on this. It seems to us that everything is going at a glacial pace. It's so hard to get anything moving, but with getting some energy audits on the buildings, that might lead to some real cost savings, which is what the city is interested in, and of course CO2 savings if we don't use as much energy. So that B3 database is immense. All 150 cities that are part of this program, they all have all of their public buildings in that, and all the data for each building month by month over the years is in there. So the idea is not to it is just sort of public shaming or public bragging, whichever side of the fence you're on. That's why the library is there for us, because that's a very energy efficient building, and so they put that in the B3 database as soon as it was done, and now the other ones are going in there eventually. So Okay,
Okay.
let's move on and
Okay,
let's,
very good.
Real quick, do you know when the meeting in May will be? Because I'm under the impression that like we could still attend the meetings,
Oh, they're public
just not be in the
meetings,
number. Yeah,
the
yeah, right.
community is welcome,
Yeah,
but,
May
TBD.
20,
If you wanna
yes.
speak, though, you have to do request.
Fill out that.
yeah,
Sure, okay.
yeah.
And I thought, I sat at the first one, I got in on it, and there was pretty, I thought pretty much enthusiasm by Scott and Emily.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought they were pretty into it, so that's
Yeah.
a good thing.
That's cool.
It's
Yeah.
hard to be against saving money. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's, I mean, bottom line, we can do a lot of good and save money at the same time. And, but save money sells better than other goods sometimes doesn't sell for
Right.
A little quality of life, maybe that would.
quality of life. Yeah.
Okay, now,
I'll get rolling then if you're ready for me.
yes, please.
Okay. And I one thing along your green step uh, uh, topic is that we had Brett Pence from Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light speak at the Duluth Township Hall last night, and he wanted to reassure everybody that at this stage of the game, the federal tax credits for the Inflation Reduction Act are still functioning. So if you have municipal buildings that can benefit from the energy efficiency programs that can be underwritten with those tax credits, for cripe's sake, use them. Good job. All right, I'll get rolling. Virtual power plants. All right. So for those who don't know me, I'm Mike Overend. I'm a volunteer that's been working for climate solutions with a number of different climate organizations, and I'm here to talk to you about virtual power plants today and the what's wise, where's how's. Now, let's go ahead and do this. Still with me? There we go. So, Minnesota spent $22.7 billion last year importing fossil fuels into our state. That's a big number. We don't make any fossil fuels, right? And it accounts for 73% of the power we use to run our economy, about 6% of our total GDP, and 1.5 times our funding for our K-12 education system. Those are big numbers. And I think that we need to invest this money in Minnesota's clean energy economy. Hopefully others do too. And this could include support for distributed energy resources. And for those who aren't familiar with that, that is power generation that doesn't happen from a central power plant. Solar on your roof or goodness gracious, any other place that energy can come from. Let's say you've got a big battery in your house that it could come from. So anyways, virtual power plants are something that I think Minnesota should invest in. And so our electric utilities are facing a major problem. The U.S. Department of Energy projects that energy consumption in the United States is going to increase by 20 to 38% by 2050. And that's largely due to the adoption of electric vehicles and increased demand for data centers and artificial intelligence. Our energy demand also increases as we beneficially electrify our energy supply and transition away from fossil fuels to more energy efficient electricity. Sorry, here, I've got to get the screen down here. Our energy demand increases in our residential center are expected to increase by 14 to 22% between 2022 and the middle of the century at 2050. Our transportation sector is supposed to increase, if we electrify our vehicles, by up to 900% to 2,000%, an enormous amount. While we adopt electric vehicles, and our industrial sector can increase anywhere from a low of 3% up to 36 to 38% in high economic growth cases. And so in 2023, 84% of US primary energy was produced from fossil fuels, and 60% of our electricity came from fossil fuels. Now, our electricity demand kind of comes in two different types. It's base load and peak load. And the base load is the kind of power that we need essentially running all the time. But there are times of the day, especially in the morning when everybody gets up and turns on their coffee pots and turns on their TVs and furnaces start up, etc. And as well as at night when you get home from work and start boiling your spaghetti, etc. When we have these peak energy demands, it can pretty much be predicted or anticipated on a regular daily basis. And then we also have irregular or unanticipated weather-related peaks that happen with the heat events in the summer and the deep cold events in the winter. So what we know is that electricity demand is growing about twice as fast as anybody really predicted it was going to happen up until very recently. And this is going to, again, be a real burden for our utilities to meet this demand. And especially the peak energy demands are the sticker. And so what they know is that they always have to engineer our electric supply to try to meet the absolute most electricity that they can anticipate we're going to need. And it's getting to those last little bits on the very top of that peak demand time that really pushes the system hard. And so if we can do things to reduce those very, very high peaks, it can help us meet these demands a lot more efficiently without having to build a whole lot of extra equipment in order to meet that peak energy demand. So and I just threw this in today, but I just wanted you to know that data centers are a really hot topic in our state legislature right now. And these data centers are going to gobble up enormous amounts of electricity. So for the proposed projects for Minnesota right now, they're saying that it's going to be equal to the electricity of all of Minnesota's 2.3 million households that are consuming electricity. Did I say that right? Basically, it's going to double the amount of electricity that we need to power the households in our state. So it is an enormous amount of electricity that these data centers can potentially gobble up out of our system. So this is just a schematic of kind of a traditional grid, electric grid, and on the upper left you see a power station. It's a centralized power station. I have a home in Cohasset, and I look over and I can see the Boswell Energy Center from Minnesota Power, and that's been there for over 40 years, and it's a classic central power station, and it pumps electricity out after burning massive amounts of coal, and that electricity is carried through a transmission system on a high voltage set of lines, and then it gets stepped down to a lower voltage set of lines that are sent out to homes and businesses and other places that use it on the distribution part of the grid. So you've got number one, the generation in the upper left, in the middle, the transmission grid, in the on the upper right, the distribution grid, and then finally on the bottom, it goes to those gray cans that are up on the top of our power poles that are the transformers that turn it into the low voltage electricity that we use in our homes. All right. And included in that system, but it wasn't on that graphic, are peaker power plants. And these are the plants that are used to meet those peak energy demand periods of time. And so they are, I kind of think of them like a muscle car or a hot rod. And basically they're designed to turn on and rev up in a big hurry and crank out a whole bunch of electricity. They're not designed to be efficient, but they are designed to turn on rapidly and then turn off rapidly. They tend to be not energy efficient. They also tend to be really dirty, and they are very profound source of chronic exposure to particulate matter 2.5 and sulfur oxides and nitrous oxides that are related to major public health impacts. And peaker plants are really commonly placed in disadvantaged communities where they have a disproportionate impact, health impact on those communities. And so they also are expensive to build. Think on the range of $500 million a pop or higher. And they also hardly ever run. So they run about 5% of all of the time that we use electricity. So it's just like many other things. If you build it and then it sits there not being used very much, it's not a very effective use of capital. But guess who gets to pay for it? Barb, tell me who pays for these peaker power plants.
We all do, don't we?
We all do. And we get to pay an extra 10% so that the utility gets their fair share of profit no matter what it costs. Don't you love that? So
they're mostly gas, are they not?
yes, and there are diesel ones, and I know up in Cook County they have a set of diesels. But yes, you're right. They are mostly natural gas powered generators. And for those who aren't familiar with it, you're always told that natural gas is so much cleaner than burning coal. But unfortunately, what they don't talk about is that the natural gas that leaks out of the natural gas system before it gets to be burned in the peaker power plant or anyplace else, that leaked natural gas is very potent in terms of global warming. And you can essentially say that a natural gas power plant is just as dirty in terms of greenhouse gas emissions as a coal-fired power plant. And that's something that most people in the power industry don't want to really tell you that much. So what we know is that we talked a little bit about that distribution power grid part of our electric grid, and you can see the transformer cans on this photograph. And what we know is that as we adopt new electric vehicles, they tend to occur in neighborhoods and clusters, because when Barb buys hers, I get jealous and want to buy mine. And then my next door neighbor says, well, that's pretty cool, I want to get one too. So clumps of electric vehicles tend to be located in neighborhoods. And most people that buy an electric car want to charge them at a peak rate, so they'll sign up for off-peak charging. And that means that you can charge from, let's just say, midnight until 6 in the morning and get a cheaper rate of electricity to do it. So everybody sets up their electric vehicle charger to start at midnight. And so the distribution grid down there at the bottom that normally is set up to power just a house and the normal equipment in the house, all of a sudden has to charge an electric car, and then a second electric car, and then a third or fourth or fifth. And if they all get charged at the same time turning on at midnight, it's like putting an enormous load on these transformers in the distribution grid, and they fail. And many of these are very old. And right now, our supply chain for transformers is really backed up. So I think it takes over 2 years now to get a transformer that a utility is ordering to put in place. So you can imagine that if you start blowing these up willy-nilly when people are buying more electric cars, that all of a sudden it's going to put a tremendous burden on our distribution grid. So one solution to that is that we can create what are called virtual power plants, and I call it a homegrown climate solution. But it's an energy efficient investment that home and business, the energy efficiency equipment that homeowner and and business owners invest in can be used to make these distributed energy resources, or they're called distributed energy resources, I'm sorry, such as solar, batteries, and they also include things like smart thermostats. And for those who aren't familiar with that, that's a thermostat that you can connect to on the internet, and you can dial it up and dial it down over the internet. They also make smart appliances like water heaters and other equipment like that that you can turn on and turn off over the internet. And electric vehicles, the chargers for electric vehicles can also be controlled by the internet. So we can use all of these different distributed energy resources and pool them together to help us save money. And the owners of this equipment can voluntarily participate in virtual power plants by giving their utility permission to connect to that equipment, and especially in places where the equipment is storing electricity, like in a home battery that many homes, especially in California, have purchased. They can serve as a source of electricity for the grid. And the other option is you can also reduce the amount of electricity that's being used by changing the settings on the thermostat or changing the settings on the water heater or the equipment to temporarily reduce the electric demand that's coming from that equipment. And so if you do that in one home, that helps. If you do it in 10 homes, it helps more. If you do it in hundreds and thousands of homes all at the same time, then it's really powerful. And by aggregating or pooling these different resources from many, many, many different homes, the power company can instantaneously create increased electricity by pulling electricity from batteries, or in the other example, by reducing the amount of electricity that all of those homes are demanding at the same time. So again, here's just another little graphic, but it shows one house that's got solar and battery in red. In blue, it's got a smart thermostat and smart appliances in that middle home. And on the right-hand side, it's a home that has an electric car with an EV charger. And if they're really up to date, they bought a new electric vehicle that has what's called vehicle to grid, or V2G capability. And what that stands for is that instead of only allowing electricity to go into the electric vehicle battery, it's also got the capability of letting electricity that's in that car battery get squirted out into the grid. So all three of those homes are examples of distributed energy resources that can be pooled together. And when the power company says, we have a peak energy demand right now, and we need more electricity to meet that demand, they can tap into those batteries that are in the home, or the solar that's running in the home, or the electric vehicle that has the V2G battery in it, or they can reduce the demand from the homes that are using smart appliances and smart thermostats, and they can help to meet those demands in an instantaneous way. And the important thing about this is that studies have been done to show that this is what is known as firm power. It means it's reliable. And if the power company asks for this electricity, it's been proven to be there well over 90% of the time, just as they expect it to be. And I think it's got a reliability factor on par with other forms of energy generation, like coal, gas, wind, solar. Okay, so it's a reliable source of energy. Now, so these are just some examples of the same equipment, but solar that you can see in homes and businesses on the left, Tesla Powerwall battery on the right. And the important thing about this also is that to put these distributed energy resources into action, there's no permitting. It's not like, well, we want to build a new peaker power plant and it's going to take 5 to 10 years to get permission to build it and then get it up and running. This is the kind of equipment that can be put in place without that intensive permitting process. And it can go up and get functional very quickly. The other thing that's beautiful about it is that you don't have to add to the distribution grid to make this work. Most of the power poles and transformers that are in place are perfectly adequate to handle this load. And because of that, instead of having all of that electricity coming from the central power plant and running down through the network and into the distribution grid and then out into homes and electric vehicles, where it's really putting a lot of wear and tear on the whole system. For a change, people's homes and businesses can act as a source of electricity that can, with much less wear and tear on the system, go back up into the grid and help supply the needs that we have. So here's a smart thermostat as an example of another way to create a distributed energy resource. And here's a picture of Tesla Powerwall on the upper left and an electric vehicle charger in the middle on the top, and then the electric car battery system on the upper right. And on the bottom left is the vehicle to grid type of battery that's in the Ford EV truck, the Lightning 150. And so the important thing to understand too is that the more different types of these different resources that I have all, that we've just looked at in these pictures, the more different types of them that there are, the more flexible this kind of system can be, and it can be tuned to help meet the peak energy demands a lot more quickly and easily. So it increases the flexibility for all of this on the grid. So why should we support virtual power plants? Well, we know that they not only benefit they benefit everybody. Let me put it that way. They benefit utilities because utilities don't have to build up new peaker power plants to handle increased peak load. They don't have to build up new transmission system. They don't have to beef up their distribution grid, and they don't have to keep up with excessive wear and tear especially on the distribution grid. And at the same time, these virtual power plants will benefit customers because they have improved reliability. They're much less expensive to build compared to the amount of money that goes into them is much less expensive than it is to build the traditional peaker power plant solution to a problem like this. They're about 40 to 60% less expensive than a peaker power plant. And the other thing that's really nice about them is that virtual power plants store electricity that can be considered clean electricity. Ideally, it's electricity that's made from a clean source, from wind or from solar. It can come from solar on the home or solar on the business, but it also can come from wind or solar that is being generated by the utility that is extra. So if you think about the times that you've driven past a number of wind turbines out in during your travels, and you might see one or more of those wind turbines just sitting idle, it's not spinning, and that's because it's been curtailed or the power company has turned it off. And and many times it's because they're making so much electricity they can't put any more into the grid. And so that power equipment that could normally be used to generate clean electricity and could be paying for itself and benefiting everybody isn't being used because there's no room for the electricity that it can make. However, in some instances, if we had batteries in our homes or batteries in our cars that could take that extra electricity and make use of it, those wind turbines can be turned back on. Same thing with solar farms that are making electricity. So it's a way to help create more renewable energy availability and decarbonize our power system. The virtual power plants will also help with our general need to electrify everything. And we know that if we electrify everything, it's more efficient than fossil fuels. excuse me, and our overall our overall energy use is going to decline. We also know that virtual power plants are much cleaner to run than things like peaker power plants, and they can have dramatic benefits to health and to equity, environmental equity. They also empower consumers because they help us play a more active role in shaping how our energy is created and used. And they also are a reason for us to have more wind and solar, especially solar from homes and businesses. So even though our state legislature right now is considering ways to choke off our distributed energy resources, these are good reasons for them to think twice about that and hopefully encourage it. So we already mentioned that there are benefits to utilities in terms of reducing wear and tear on their distribution grid. We also know that virtual power plants are rapidly scalable. That means we can ask a power company to start a virtual power plant program, and they can essentially reach out to their customers and in a very short period of time, help enroll them to participate in these programs. And finally, virtual power plants also help utilities meet their carbon-free energy goals, especially in Minnesota, that we have 100% goal for, or 100% clean energy by 2040 goal. So they also benefit us as consumers. They can help us meet our peak energy demands rapidly. They provide cost savings for everybody, not just for the people that have solar on their home or a battery in their home or a smart thermostat. Everybody will have a lower electric bill with these. They reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. As we said before, they're rapidly deployed. They don't have permitting involved to slow down the process. And they also support the importance of maintaining the Inflation Reduction Act in Congress, because we know that the goal for that was to build electrification and energy efficiency goals across America. So these are good reasons for the Congress to protect the Inflation Reduction Act. And virtual power plants also encourage public awareness of energy efficiency opportunities. And so I'll finish by saying that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in 2022 passed an order, or excuse me, in 2020, they passed an order called 2222. And that really put virtual power plants on the same footing as the traditional central generation plants that utilities use. And their goal in doing that was that it would allow virtual power plants the runway to be built up and scaled into a meaningful level across the United States without any hindrance from the federal side of the situation. And both Republicans and Democrats, there were two former FERC chairmen, one from each side of the aisle, both agreed and said in this statement that we need virtual power plants and we need to incentivize consumers to become part of that system. So there's an organization called Solar United Neighbors that is a national nonprofit that has been working to help people put solar on their homes. And one of their staff members is Shannon Anderson. She lives in the state of Wyoming, but she's their distributed power plant or virtual power plant policy director. And Solar United Neighbors has partnered up with Clean Energy Coalition. You can see some of the names on the right-hand side there. To create model rules and regulations for virtual power plants to thrive in the United States. And they have decided that instead of trying to do it in Congress, they're going to do it on a state-by-state basis. And so they created a set of model rules and regulations, and they are trying to get those enacted into law on a state level. And the reason is that right now, the virtual power plants exist in about 25 different states, and I think there's something like 70 different virtual power plants in existence, but they all have different rules and regulations. And so it's this patchwork and quilt work that doesn't really work very well across state lines or even across states. And if we can standardize model rules and regulations for this, it'll help them get up and running much more easily, especially for utilities that cross state lines. So they identified 4 states that they want to introduce this legislation into, and Minnesota was one of them. And so these are the main goals that they have in trying to um, get their model rules and regulations put into play. And I'm not going to run through these, but basically they're just designed to try to create a fair playing field both for utilities and their consumers at the same time, and try to make this a well thought through beneficial process for everybody who participates. And so on 1 week ago today, in our state legislature, both the House and Senate had an identical bill introduced that was designed to be a bill to ask all of our utilities to start the process of creating virtual power plants. And the title of the bill is, in quotes there, additional information in a public utilities resource plan required, directed to file a virtual power plant tariff and program with the Minnesota PUC. And so this is how the process is getting started. And my understanding is that uh, because they only had till Friday of last week in order to get through all of the necessary initial committee hearings. I know that it was heard in both the House and the Senate, but I don't think that it got heard in enough different committees to get all the way through the process. So the goal will probably be that this bill will be carried forward into the next year's legislature, and it doesn't have to be reintroduced because it's part of the same biennium, but it hopefully will have a chance to develop lots of support, because you folks are going to pick up your phones and call your legislators and tell them we want virtual power plants, and hopefully it will be passed into law probably next year. So again, here's a list of the summary of the bill according to Vast Democracy, which is a legislative tracker. And they have all of these different elements in this bill that was introduced both in the House and the Senate. And the specific goals include reducing demand during system peaks, optimizing the use of renewable energy, and lowering ratepayer bills. And I think that that's probably enough to be said about that. So the U.S. Department of Energy did a virtual power plant liftoff report that looked at what they thought could happen with virtual power plants. And they said that these things can be scaled rapidly by 2030. And for those of you who know, climate change isn't hanging around while the Trump administration is doing what it's doing. Global warming is speeding up, and it's getting worse and worse. And the original goal of meeting our 1.5-degree increase in average global temperature is probably it's probably not possible anymore. But every 1/10 of a degree that we go above that is bad news. So we need solutions that are going to work in a hurry. And Barb mentioned nuclear power and the moratorium in the state legislature. And I can envision where nuclear power will have some really specific places that it's going to be useful for us to help meet our energy demands. However, I don't think that anybody is going to see a new nuclear power plant in the United States before the year 2035, or even later than that. And I may be wrong, but that's my impression. And that's 10 years from now, and really bad stuff is going to happen before then. So in contrast, we can get virtual power plants up and running and do a lot of the job that needs to be done, especially by nuclear power plants, where these virtual power plants can meet up to 20% of our peak energy demands. And they can save consumers up to $20 billion a year. That's a lot of money. They can increase grid reliability, resilience, and security, and they can lower our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's it. I'll stop there. I'll try to answer questions, but thank you for your time, and I hope I made you dream about virtual power plants.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Where's you, Celia?
Yeah, well, I do have a question. So if, I've got my EV and it's got a nice full, battery because I've been out driving around or maybe it's, but I put a lot of power into the battery. And now they want to access it. Where is the intelligence to come out, to look at my EV being plugged in, to see it's full, to pull that power back and put it on the grid? Where does that
Sure.
intelligence running?
Sure. So I'll just give you an example of a virtual power plant that's been in use, I think, for about 8-10 years. And I'll step back for 1 second. Anybody here have off-peak electric furnace or off-peak electric water?
Yeah.
That's the old version of this. Okay. So that's called a demand response way to save on electricity. And we've been using that for a long time. A newer version now is the one I'll describe. So the main utility for Phoenix, Arizona has about 1 million customers. And about 8 years ago, they said, we're getting killed with our peak energy demands in the late afternoon during the summers in Phoenix. What could possibly be happening when people get home from work at 5 o'clock? When they get into their hot house, what's the first thing they do?
Air conditioning.
Yeah. Everybody turns their air conditioning on full blast and it's killing them. So they said, hey, we're going to start a virtual power plant. We're going to make it available. So if you want to buy a smart thermostat, you're going to get it for like $60, and they normally retail for $250, something like that. And if you'll buy a smart thermostat, if you'll participate in the program that we're going to run, we'll ask you to let us take over your thermostat. We're going to do it in a way that doesn't really bother you or make change your habits at home. Hopefully, it's going to be invisible to you. But what we're going to do is, if you'll participate with us, we'll turn your thermostat down over the internet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to pre-cool your house. And then when you get home at 5 o'clock, we'll turn the thermostat back up a little bit and your house will be nice and cool, but you won't be running your air conditioner. And because you're going to participate with us to do that, we're going to give you a lower cost of electricity to run your air conditioner during that period of time. And your total energy bills are going to get reduced. And there'll be more electricity available on the grid for those people that aren't participating in this virtual power plant program. And they'll still pay their regular rate, but there'll be enough electricity there so that we don't have to run the peaker plant that costs even more for everybody to pay for. And so they have 160,000 people that are enrolled in that program. And over the last couple of really hot summers, it's worked beautifully for them to help reduce their peak energy demand. So what they try to do with these programs, to finish off with your question, is they try to use advanced software and artificial intelligence combined with working with their customers to set these programs up and incentivize them in ways that make people want to participate. But they'll have rigid rules that say we're not gonna make this happen in a way that will harm you or will bother you, or if for some reason you say, I can't take it, I've got to run my thermostat right now, I don't care, you have the freedom to do that. And so, does that answer the question that you had?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty nice answer. I have another question. When these virtual power plants are up and running and approved, that means the demise of the off-peak power rate and the off-peak intermittent water heater rate, right? I mean, they're all going to be replaced by sophisticated equipment that will give us some variable power, variable charge depending on when we use our power.
I don't know that it's going to necessarily replace off-peak furnaces and off-peak water heaters, but I would say it might be an augment them or an addition to them, is my understanding. And I don't know that for sure, Barb, but I just get the feeling that uh, well, here, I'll just share that I called Great River Energy office and talked to somebody that was kind of in charge of this concept for their, major utility that serves much of rural Minnesota. And they're all over this. I mean, they're like, we want this to happen. So I don't have any detailed information on it, but I know that for example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture just awarded quite a bit of money to 9 of the 27 GRE distribution cooperatives. So I'm here in Two Harbors, Co-op Light and Power is my cooperative here. I have a home in Cohasset. Lake Country Power is the cooperative over there. And Lake Country Power scored one of these USDA grants that was designed to help build virtual power plant capability. And so there were 9 different GRE cooperatives that got money from the USDA to do that.
It seems somewhat strange. I talked to Lake Country Power. We currently have 3 meters on our house, one for regular power, one for intermittent water heating, and one for off-peak. As and when I get a heat pump, I will need a 4th meter. As and when I get an EV, I will need a 5th meter. At this point, you have to say, there must be a better way of doing this. This is just crazy having this many meters. Got it.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Barb, but I can tell you that I went from a house and I got rid of my off peak. But when I redid my home, I went from 3 different meters down to 1, and I have solar.
Yeah. More questions. We're after 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Mike, will there be a generic standard of specifications to make all the different manufacturers' equipment play nice together?
That's a good question, but I know that the idea behind the Solar United Neighbors legislative proposal is to make it so that any equipment that can potentially participate in one of these things is allowed to participate. Does that make sense? They're trying to make it so that whether you have a Nest thermostat or a Honeywell thermostat, it doesn't matter. They can both be used. That if you have a hot water heater that can be controlled by the internet, that it doesn't matter what brand name it is, it can be used. So, and I think the same thing for any type of electric vehicle charger or home battery or whatever. So I know that that's the goal, is to try to make it as agnostic in terms of you know who manufactures the equipment, as long as it can communicate with the utility and vice versa.
Okay. Well, maybe we should
Does
wind it up right now. Or Bill, do you have a quick one?
does this system require alterations by the power company from the power source. I mean, most of what we're talking about is the changes in the home or in the business or the user of the power. But does it require an alteration? Well, for example, here in Ely, if power is coming from the hydroelectric plant, does this system require modification in the transmission from the source?
Okay, so my understanding is no, it does not. That it uses the existing equipment, especially in the distribution part of the grid, the power poles and the transformers. That's the part that, you know, kind of handles this new source of energy. And what was I going to say? That part of the beauty of this is that if you make the investment in solar for your home or the electric vehicle or the smart thermostat, you've made this investment and you want to get your money out of it. Okay. So it's designed to provide you both with hopefully energy efficiency and convenience. But what I'm going to say is that when you participate in a virtual power plant, it can potentially provide you with another financial benefit, a revenue stream that you can use to help pay for that equipment in a way that wasn't available to you before. And so um, uh, it's not going to, I mean, the power company itself is going to have to either do this job itself or hire a third party. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to pool everybody together that has this equipment. So they call that aggregating or pooling. And for a lot of the virtual power plants that are in existence right now, there are third party companies that their job is to go out and approach different electric consumers and say, hey, how'd you like to participate in a virtual power plant, you know, with your utility? And we'll sign you up and we'll make sure that you understand how it works, and we'll be the middleman between the power company and you, and we'll make it work. And that's especially happening in states that are not really regulated utility states like we are in Minnesota. So that's part of what this new legislation that got introduced last week is trying to do, I think, is to help make it possible so that the utility can say, hey, we now have to run these virtual power plants. That's what the state legislature says. We need to do this, and we can either try to do it ourselves or we can hire these aggregator companies to come in and get these programs up and running. So there'll be some effort and some expense on the utility side to do this, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than building a new peaker power plant. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than running one.
So they really ought to be, the Lake Country Power and GRE should be buying lots of batteries and giving them each household should have its own battery provided by GRE, so that we can all participate. And that would make a beautiful grid, right?
Exactly. And there's a cooperative utility in Colorado called Holy Cross, and they have been doing exactly that. They've been helping their customers buy batteries and put them in their homes and running a virtual power plant and making it all work. You're brilliant, Barb.
Oh, yeah. On this happy note, maybe we should wind it up for today. Thanks, Mike. Great story you've told us. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Bye.
And for Christ's sake, tell your legislators you want virtual power plants.
Got it.
Great.